Hello, everybody. My name is Dafna Michaelson Jenet, and I'm the state representative for House District 30, which covers Commerce City. Today, I have two other legislators with me who also cover Commerce City, Rep. Adrienne Benavides and Senator Dominic Moreno. And I have the unique privilege of acting as interviewer so that today you can learn more about who your representatives are. I was going to do some sort of quiz show music, but I don't know how to do that sort of thing. So we're just not going to do that. But in the meantime, I thought that it would be really good for us to have a conversation together and learn a little bit more about who we are as people. A lot of times we get to know our senators or representatives only in that role, but we are actually citizens just like you, a citizen legislature. We live in the city, we work in our city, and we pay the same taxes that you pay, and we follow the same laws that you follow. So we wanted you to know a little bit more about who we were. Really, rather, I wanted you to know a little bit more about who they were, but that's another story for another day. So I'm going to start with Representative Benavides. Representative Benavides, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and a little bit about your background. Where did you come from and how did you get here?
Well, thank you for that question. It's one I know the answer to. Yeah, my parents came from northern New Mexico in 1939 to Denver. So I was born and raised, as were 5 of the 6 siblings in my family, in the Denver area. I went to Denver schools. I went to the University of Colorado, both for undergraduate and for law school. So I'm divorced and I have 2 daughters. I have a daughter who is 41 and a younger daughter who is 27. One of them, the older one, works at a local theater company as the managing director and over the arts education program. And my other daughter is a school teacher in the Denver public school system. She teaches social studies. So that kind of keeps me busy. I also have 2 little dogs, one I keep looking at because she wants to play ball. But I have done all kinds of things, but I won't go into all that. But that tells you where I'm from. And I live in House District 32. We not only have Commerce City, we have a lot of unincorporated Adams County, which is the southwestern corner of Adams County, and I live in the unincorporated area of Adams County.
Well, thank you very much for that answer. You're not going to get away from all the things that you've done because we're going to come back to that. Dominic, it's your turn. Senator Moreno, please give us a little introduction of who you are and how you come to be here today.
Sure. Thanks for the question. So I am from Commerce City. I was born and raised here. I live a block away from the house I grew up in, where my parents still live, and my sister lives across the street from them now. So pretty soon, the DeMott Avenue, Tichy Boulevard streets will be dominated by the Moreno family. But went through all the local public schools here in the Adams 14 school district, and then was really fortunate, got an amazing scholarship and went out to Georgetown in Washington, D.C. Came back home and ran for city council 6 months after graduating from college, and was elected, and kind of the rest is history ever since. That, hard to believe, that was actually 11 years ago already. And I've been in public service ever since, and am honored to represent all of you in the state Senate. I have all of Commerce City, as well as the unincorporated communities that Adrienne was mentioning, including where she lives, Federal Heights, and South Westminster. So it's a pretty expansive district.
It is an expansive district, and I represent Commerce City, the areas that Adrienne does not represent. I also have Aurora and Thornton and Brighton and Henderson, and a little bit of Bennett and Keansburg and Strasburg. So we all have very varied districts, and they're really fascinating. And the people that we get to represent are as varied as we are. My history is a little bit different. My family came to America in the early 1910s, leaving Hungary and Poland because of persecution for their faith. We are a Jewish family. And my mother and father, well, they needed both of them, had moved to Israel. And I was born in Tel Aviv, Israel, and came to America as a baby. But don't worry, I can still run for president because I'm a natural born citizen of the United States and I have a birth certificate to prove it. So if anyone is concerned, you're welcome to come over, visit my birth certificate, and we can have a long conversation. Just joking. Well, not about the birth certificate. Anyway, so I wanted to learn a little bit about how we got here, right? It's not necessarily, Dominic, you have a little bit more of a direct path, but there's a story there. It's not always a direct path to become a representative, an elected representative for your community. So Adrienne, I'll start with you. Talk a little bit about your background and your work background and your education background. And the question I have is, did you ever think that you would be an elected official? Was it ever in your mind? And when did that first happen for you? Representative.
That's an interesting question. You know, my mother told me that I always knew I wanted to be an attorney ever since I was little. And I, even in high school, wrote an obituary about having been an attorney because that was our assignment. So I knew I wanted to do that. And law school was kind of a second career for me. I had worked for the federal government, and then I knew I wanted to go to law school. And I went after getting my undergraduate degree in what I tell people euphemistically was the 16-year plan. So if you're out there thinking about finishing your education or going back to law school, do it. It's not impossible. So I went to law school and I graduated in 1991 and have been practicing law since then. My undergraduate degree was in political science, so I was always interested in it, in politics. The first campaign I worked on was when I could first vote in 1972. I worked on the McGovern campaign. So I have worked on many campaigns over the years. And I think it was in 93, I ran for a state representative in House District 4. I didn't win, so I kind of put it to the side and said, well, I tried that, I'm not going to do it. And then I tell people I am the accidental candidate because Dominic and Jesse Ulabari had concocted this plan when Jesse left that Dominic, who is perfect for his position as our state senator, would run, and they wanted to find somebody to run for Dominic's seat. So they talked me into it, and this is a week and a half before caucuses, which is like 3 months before the primary and the ballots go out. And they said, no problem. Nobody's gonna run with us endorsing you. Well, that was not the case. And there were several that wanted to run, but it boiled down to one other. And it was a very difficult primary. I mean, I squeaked by and was successful. And as an elected official, it never ends. I have two opponents in my reelection campaign now. So I had thought about it, then I gave it up, and then it came back. So again, you never know what's going to happen in your life.
That's an amazing story. And I feel very grateful that I get to work with you, Representative Benavides. So I'll send Representative Ulabari and Senator Moreno it was Senator Ulabari and Senator Moreno a thank you letter. So Dominic, how is it that you came into politics, and when is the first time that you thought maybe that this was going to be a thing? And where did you live again the first time you ran for office? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I would say, like Adrienne, I always had kind of an interest in politics. I followed it when I was growing up. I still remember actually the 2000 election. I was still in high school, And if you all remember, that election was not decided the night of the election. It went on multiple days and weeks. And but I remember watching the results and still being up at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning watching the results come in. And my mom was like, "Go to bed, you weirdo. Like no other kid is doing this." So I was always really interested in politics, but and had some idea that I might run for office one day. But I always thought it would be in the traditional way. You know, I'd go out, have a successful career in something, and then eventually run for office when I was much older. That is kind of the traditional format of getting involved in politics, and I kind of flipped the script. I did it backwards to where being in elected office and running was actually my first job out of college. And so, you know, soon actually, I'm up for re-election this year, but soon I will be term limited. And I will be 39 when I'm term limited. And then I will have to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. So it's a little different. And that first race, I ran out of my parents' basement. I graduated in 2008, the height of our last recession, and I had trouble finding work. And I decided to move back home and into my parents' basement like every college graduate those days. And that's actually where I ran my first campaign for city council, being 24 years old and unemployed from my parents' basement. And I never thought anyone would vote for someone with that type of profile, I guess I'll say, but they did. And I was elected, and kind of the rest is history. So it's been a crazy, wild ride. And, you know, we'll see where things go from here. I've really enjoyed public service. But eventually, you know, term limits say you got to move on. So we'll see what happens when that time comes.
Oh, we'll see, we'll see, we'll see. It's the question on everybody's lips. What's next for Senator Moreno? Okay, so I'll answer the question too, just to be fair. You know, when I was in college, my freshman year, I was really interested in politics. And I had never been involved in anything political in my life. And so I took poli-sci and I took speech in my freshman year. And I was told that the professor for poli-sci had the nickname Schrecker, Schrecker, the GPA wrecker, and that the speech teacher was indeed the hardest speech teacher there was in the school. Well, I received a D as in Dafna for poli-sci and a C as in Charlie for speech. And they were the lowest grades I ever got in college my entire career. They also got me kicked out of college for getting that D and having such a low GPA my first semester. But fortunately, my second semester, I was pulling a 3.7. And so I spent the entire summer writing, you know, like a letter with a stamp, back and forth with the Academic Standards Committee, begging them not to kick me out of school. I never told my parents that I had been kicked out of school. And I got back into this school, which I really, really loved. I went to Stern College for Women in the middle of New York City, and it was the most tremendous experience ever. But the first time I really thought about running for office was often when we had that conversation about my citizenship. And why I make that joke often, because my mother always said, well, Dafna, you are a natural born citizen of the United States, so you could run for president. And it was this big joke in my family. And when it came to trying to get into college, I thought, what should I write my essay on? Well, wouldn't any college accept somebody who might possibly be president of the United States one day? And so every single one of my essays, because they were different for every school, every single one of my essays was about why I wanted to be president of the United States and why I could be president even though I was born in a different country. But then I, graduated from college, and politics was not where I wanted to be, but I wanted to be in a different type of politics. And that is the nonprofit community. And for 20 years, more than 20 years, I worked in the nonprofit community and still run a nonprofit organization today called the Journey Institute. And this is the business that I run with my husband, where primarily we do major TEDx events every year. TED Talks that are independently licensed. And so we hold a number of licenses between us on our team. There are 4 members of our team. And every year we try to give people an opportunity in Colorado to get on stage and share their ideas we're spreading. And to me, there's a perfect synergy. I made a promise to myself when I was 14 that I would never complain about a problem unless I was willing to work on the solution. And nonprofits really felt like where it was at for me. But then I took a training from an organization that is now known as Vote, Run, Lead, but then was known as the White House Project, and learned all about running for office. And it was fascinating what they said. They said a woman always needs to be asked, Representative Benavides, a woman always needs to be asked, but a man might just wake up and think, okay, I could run for this, Senator Moreno. And we had to make a promise when we finished the class. And I'll remember, it was Stephanie Berger, who has continued to be a mentor in my life, stood up and said, I'm going to make you promise that you're never going to wait to be asked to run for office, that you're just going to do it when the time is right. Well, my life took a lot of twists and turns. And it was actually the day that I had submitted my book to the publisher. I was done. I pressed go. The publisher was ready to publish my book. And I was like, what am I going to do next? And I was in the grocery store. And one of my friends who was a clerk at the grocery store was also on Commerce City City Council at the time. His name is Steve. And Steve said to me, hey, Dafna, I need you to run for office. And I looked at him and I said, hey, Steve, I'm in my pajamas. Yes, I went to King Soopers in my pajamas because I needed a little bit of milk and it was in a hurry and whatever. So there I was in my pajamas and Steve is asking me to run for office. And I remember sitting there in the car on the way home saying, oh, expletive. I waited to be asked. I had made a promise that I wouldn't wait to be asked. But that's when I started for the first time running for office. And I actually started by looking at city council. And then Commissioner Tedesco actually approached me and said, why don't you look at this House seat race? And the rest, as they say, is history. So that's a little bit about my story. So Representative Benavides, I want to ask you, in your life, either both before the legislature, well, let's just stick with before legislature. What would you say, and you can say your children, but don't feel obligated. Women always feel obligated to answer this question with their children. We know that your children were an amazing accomplishment, but what would you feel was your greatest work accomplishment or life accomplishment prior to the legislature?
You know, you were talking about nonprofits, and back in 1980, I think it was, I was approached to go to a meeting to talk about how to start a radio station. There was an opportunity, there was a radio frequency, and we only had 2 radio stations in this Denver area market, one for Latinos. It was KBNO, it was AM before, with Pancho Sanchez, who had been in the legislature years before. I didn't know that then. And so they said, well, we could get this. It was an FM station and started as a Latino, Chicano run station. So we worked, and it was primarily women who worked on getting that frequency. And we had to, they said, oh, you have to raise $500,000 just to get it on the air, and then you have to raise money to get it running. And we had nothing but the frequency, so we had to do everything. So we had all kinds of fundraisers to raise money, but we had to set up an office. We had to do all of our set up our budget, all of our requirements to start a business, because it was a nonprofit business. So I learned so much. I mean, we rented different offices. Our first studio, we didn't have a lot of money, so we put egg cartons on the wall as our acoustics for our studio. We got our community, the Chicano community, involved completely. And after about 2.5 years, we went on the air. And they have been on the air almost 40 years and are still on the air. So it was not only a huge accomplishment for myself and the community, as I chaired their first board of directors for the first few years. And you'll hear Secretary Salazar talk about this. He loves this story that I didn't want him on the board initially. This was about 2 years into it, because he was working then for, he was general counsel for the governor. And I mean, this was a truly working board. I mean, even the night we went on the air, in the afternoon, we were cleaning the bathrooms and everything else to get it ready. So I thought, oh, he doesn't have time to do that. But he was persistent, and we eventually let him come on the board. And his first time at a meeting, we had a Christmas market. And so we had to break down everything and clear it out. And we were doing that before our meeting started. And he showed up in his suit, and we told him, well, we got to do this first. And he rolled up his sleeves and he got in there and helped us. And then we had the meeting. That's the kind of board it was. So it was probably the best learning experience, and the people that I've met through that, because I knew him, way back when. It was just a remarkable experience.
What was your biggest takeaway from it? Is there kind of a lesson that you learned that you carry with you from that experience?
Well, there was a couple of lessons. I sort of alluded to them. Is one, even though everybody was supportive, it was a core group of women that really were doing a lot of the work and putting it together. But just like any good thing, it takes a whole community. I mean, when I say we were doing fundraisers, we had some women making these little babies out of nylon stockings with some stuffing in them, and we called them Wada babies. We were selling them. We had zoot suit parties. We had break dancing competitions for kids, everything. But it wouldn't have worked if the community wouldn't have been part of that. And that's a takeaway for this job. We can have the best ideas we want, but if we don't have supportive community or group with us, it doesn't matter. So I think those three things are the best things.
Beautiful. Thank you. Senator Moreno, let me turn that question on you. Sort of an experience or highlight in your life pre the legislature, but that includes your city council time, if you would like, that you would like to share with us, and also your key takeaways from it.
So for Adrienne, thanks for playing such a critical role in my upbringing. I actually hadn't heard that history, but every weekend we would have to clean the house because that's what my mom insisted on. But the background music to that always was Canción Mexicana. So that's just what I grew up with. So that's awesome. So my biggest accomplishment before being elected to office, I would say, so keep in mind that I was in college before being elected to office. I would say graduating as valedictorian of my class was probably a really big accomplishment for me. And, kind of little known fact, in addition to being valedictorian, I was actually elected prom king by my high school classmates as well. It was this very, very rare window where being smart, you could also be popular and be smart, which isn't actually always, the two don't always go hand in hand. But so senior year was obviously just a really incredible time in my life. Did prom king, but then shortly after also being named valedictorian of the high school class. So I would say that was my big accomplishment. And then obviously getting into a school like Georgetown was also, I would say, a big accomplishment.
Takeaways? What was your takeaway?
Oh man, I would say, so my big takeaway was there's not many things that you can't do as long as you put in hard work. I worked really hard in high school to get where I was, and that meant I could get into one of the top universities in our country, and then obviously then utilize that education to give back to my community and to utilize it to benefit my community. So yeah, hard work and perseverance really pays off in the end.
Amen. Okay, so I'll answer that question too. And I think mine came later in life, as did my legislative career. I had my career in nonprofit, and it was actually after Hurricane Katrina, and we were watching how the community was coming together to really rebuild New Orleans. But I couldn't get out of my mind the image of people from New Orleans standing on the roof of the Superdome in Houston and saying, "Where is my government? Where is my government?" And I remember thinking, well, what do you mean, where is your government? Where is your community is the question I want to know. And then I saw these images of community. And fast forward to 2008, I was dating this guy. Spoiler alert, he's now my husband. And he asked me what I would do if I won the lottery. And he didn't know that that was a very triggering question for me. My parents played the lottery regularly when I was growing up, and my mother always played the game. When we win the lottery, you can have a car, or you can have new clothes, because all of my clothes were used clothes. Abba will stop working at the bingo hall because that was his second job, and it was really irritating to his lungs because he had asthma and allergies, and we were poor, and being poor is no fun, and I know that others can chime in that it's just not fun, and I hated the lottery. I hated the lottery. Don't tell the lottery people this, by the way. I hated the lottery because I believed that my parents were and I still do, are very good people. In my faith tradition, we believe that there are angels who walk amongst us. And I am certain that my stepfather is one of those angels. And if he is one of those angels and he didn't win the lottery, nobody's winning the lottery. So when I turned 18 in Ohio, where we lived, I took my dollar to the mall where I knew I could get a return on my investment instead of to buy a lottery ticket. I don't know if there's still $1 because I don't buy lottery tickets. So I'm having this whole kind of internal meltdown in the grocery store, and I'm not a woman with 2 kids who happened to be in private school at the time for many, many reasons. And I was, I had a lot of baggage. So getting somebody to date you is really hard when you have so much baggage. So I didn't want him to know I had so much baggage. So I was like, you know what, you buy a lottery ticket and I'll pray for you. And there's a lot more to this story that we just don't have time for. But we get into the car and he looks at me with this glint in his eyes. And I remember the moment so clearly because my life changed in this moment. And he said to me, "So what are you going to do when we win the lottery?" So first I had my big explosion of all the stuff I just told you. And then I said, well, I'm going to buy a Porsche Cayenne, hybrid, of course, because I care about the environment. And by the way, Porsche didn't have a hybrid then, so they owe me a free hybrid. So anybody who's connected with Porsche, give me that free hybrid, although Amendment 41 won't allow it. Anyway, so then he looks at me and says, would you travel? And I said, you better believe I'm going to travel, and I'm going to go to all 50 states, and I'm going to ask every governor what they're doing to engage their citizens in solving community problems. So I wasn't running for office at this time. I wasn't an elected official. I wasn't even active in my party. That wasn't how I rolled. I was on a lot of nonprofit boards. That was the work that I did, and really, truly where my heart and my passion were. But I was onto something. The very next day, I filed for a 501c3 to get my nonprofit license. I started talking to all of the people. I had just finished Leadership Denver. I started talking to all the people in my Leadership Denver class to ask them, hey, what do you think? And they would say, you're crazy, but if anybody can do it, you can do it. I asked John Hickenlooper, and he said, Dafna, do you not see what's coming down the economy? Like, you're nuts. But that sounds like a great idea. I actually put that quote on my website at the time. He was mayor of Denver. And I did it. I quit my job. I traveled to all 50 states. I lost everything in the process, every dollar, every penny that I had saved. And I gained everything in the process, including my husband and the life that I live now. So, the lesson I learned, I wrote a book about it called It Takes a Little Crazy to Make a Difference. But the lesson I learned is that no matter what you look like, what you sound like, how much money or education you have the power to solve problems in your communities. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. You don't have to wait until you have that big, long career like Senator Moreno thought he had to do. You don't have to have your law degree when you're in your 20s, like Representative Adrienne Benavidez learned. It doesn't matter where you are in life or what you think of yourself. You have the power to solve the problems in your community, and don't let anybody get in your way, because you can solve them. So that's my big solution story. So now I want to know, I'm going to move into our legislative arena. When you got elected, did you think it would be like it is in reality, right? So before you're elected, if you haven't actually worked in the arena, it might seem very different on the outside. So when you got on the inside of the legislature, was it what you expected? Representative Benavidez.
I want to go back to the easy questions. But actually I do, because I want to tell you, I didn't realize you didn't like the lottery. I play the lottery all the time. And my first job, we went to Loyola grade school, and our church had bingo twice a week on Wednesdays and Sundays. So that was my first paid job. They paid us $7.50 each night to sell specials, because we could do it starting at 12 years old. And it was great. So I still do a little of that. Anyway, because I'll even push the bingo hall in my district, Turn Bingo over on 70th and Pecos. I won $5,000 there, when I first moved into this district. So don't give up on that, Dafna. Anyway, to the real question. Even though I had run before, I kind of looked at it as, it's all this policy talk, and it's all, everybody is a wonk, and we're all going to talk about that. So that was a little surprising to me when we got in, and learning that there's a lot more give and take in the legislature in getting things done, and we don't usually get a lot of the huge things we want done, although I would be the first to say I think that's changing. But there is a lot more compromise. I mean, I always looked at it between the two parties, not just within your own party. So I think that was an eye-opener to me.
Sorry, it took me a minute to get to the unmute button. That was a huge eye opener for me as well. Senator Moreno, what about you? What did you think beforehand, and what was the reality?
Yeah, so I was somewhat fortunate that I had some experience at the Capitol before getting elected. When I was on the city council, I served as a legislative aide at the Capitol. For my first session was for Senator Bruce Whitehead from Durango, and then the second session was for Representative Ed Casso, who was my predecessor in the House, and as well as Representative Crisanta Duran. And so I had two sessions where I had the ability to observe the process, see what it was like, but That being said, it's still very different when you're the person that's actually holding the seat and casting the votes. And what I've learned most, I think, in my time in the legislature is how important relationships are. Relationships with your colleagues, with different stakeholders, because a lot of times those relationships matter just as much as the policy that you're pushing. You have to establish a lot of trust at the Capitol, and people have to believe that you are, proposing a policy or proposing a change for the right reasons. And that trust isn't easily built. It takes a long time. It takes multiple conversations with, everyone, with not only your colleagues that share the same party identification as you, but also with your colleagues on the opposite side of the aisle. And so certainly what I've learned most is to invest heavily in relationships, and to building that trust, so that, when you go to people, when you, would like to see a change to a policy, or you'd like to see something taken in a different direction, that people don't really, they don't question your motives as much. They believe where you're coming from. They believe you're doing it for the right reasons. And that makes the policymaking process a lot easier.
Beautiful. For me, it was culture. I think I was shocked at everyone calling me representative. I was used to a really casual culture where everybody was referred to by first names, and that's except for a little bit during my time at the university. I worked at the University of Denver. But for the most part, everyone was referred to by first names everywhere I went. And then all of a sudden I walk into the door and I meet a bill drafter and they say, "Hello, representative." And I'm like, okay, you don't know me, but I'm a representative already. How did that happen? And I started learning that, the people in the basement who are the backbone, literally, of all of the legislation that we create, study our pictures and our names for the freshmen who are going to come in as they're getting ready to work with us, and so does the security, and so do the sergeants, and it was just so interesting to me. And my husband and I had often wondered before. I mean, we really talked a lot before I ran for office. And part of the reason, again, we didn't come from a strong political background. And quite frankly, we were registered to different political parties. But what we wanted to understand was sometimes we saw, and we were looking, of course, on the federal level, as most people do. Most people don't really understand that state and local politics is where the laws that govern their daily lives are really created. But we were looking at the federal government, and we saw people that we knew must have truly, truly wanted to be in office after having run for office, must have truly wanted to be in office to be able to go through all of that. And they must have truly wanted to make a difference. And what happened? What kind of personality shift happened? And I made a solemn promise to my husband that if he ever saw my personality changing, or my humility changing, that I would get out of public office. Because keeping that humility is sometimes hard when everybody's referring to you as representative, representative, representative. As a matter of fact, the sergeants told my children they had to call me representative on the floor because they weren't little. They're not little. They're 18, 19, and 23. But they have to call me representative when they are visiting me in the Capitol. So that was kind of the biggest shocking moment for me. Representative Benavides, we're going to move to the really hard questions. If you had to think about it, what's been the hardest thing you've experienced so far at the legislature? What's truly challenged you and or distressed you the most in your time in the legislature?
I guess that's not so hard, because at least for me, it's really trying to understand how house leadership works. It's one of those things that, see, since we are all individuals, all separately elected, and we all probably have something we want to do after this. I just want to be retired, but most people have something they want to do after this. That comes into play. And so understanding how leadership makes their decisions, and that's I'm used to more collaboration in organizations and in those kinds of issues. And this is more not that way. So that has been the most difficult thing for me because it's not what I'm used to at all. And I see you guys shaking your heads. So
No, I was gonna say that's fair. I mean, and quite frankly, all three of us are on leadership. So in different ways, and you as the whip, me as co-caucus chair, and Senator Moreno as incoming chair of the Joint Budget Committee and past chair of the Joint Budget Committee. I mean, these are things that that we all work on. But I love your vision of collaboration, and I think that collaboration is always where it's at, and that there's still time. We're only at the halfway mark. Okay, Senator Moreno, what about you? Toughest moments, and I know you've just been through a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously the budget situation this year was really, really tough and heartbreaking, and really at times led me to question whether to remain in public service, because frankly, cutting programs that people rely on, that is not the reason I got into public service. It's to help people. It's to try to make a difference. And unfortunately, the realities of the budget are what they are. There are dollars that come in, there are dollars that go out, and at the end of the day, those two have to balance. You can't spend more than you bring in. And so that was a really difficult process. But I would say even more than that is coming to the realization that it is impossible to make everyone happy. I clearly, listen, I'm in politics. I like to be liked. We've already established that because I was prom king in high school. Like, that's a given. And I've noticed it's been a noticeable shift even in the time that I've been in elected office. Early on, you could when you made decisions that people disagreed with, they would say, well, I don't agree with Dominic on this issue, but I believe he's a good person, and I think he is trying his best, and I think he is trying to do what's best for our community. That sentiment is more and more rare. Now it's, if you make a decision people disagree with, then you're written off. Then there's nothing that you agree with those people on. And I think it does have to do somewhat with the influence of social media, of people being empowered to kind of say whatever they want behind a computer screen or behind the protection of the keyboard. I think the most difficult thing for me to adjust to is the effect that has on your family. Because it's not just us that serve, it's actually our families too. And there are certain sacrifices that you make. Sometimes you don't spend as much time with family because your time is the most valuable thing you have. And the way I approach elected office is my time belongs to others. And so I never turn down a meeting. I never turn down a phone call. I never turn down an email. Because that is my responsibility, is to get back to people. And the effect that it has on, I would say, your family, in the sense that, when people say things about you on social media, your family sees those things, and it at times hurts them pretty deeply, and their first instinct is to respond. And you have to remind them that it will do no good to respond. And that, after being in office for a decade, you start to develop a thicker skin, and you just realize that it comes with the territory and that you're never going to make everyone happy. And so you just have to do what you think is best and let the cards fall as they may. And so that, I know my family is still adjusting to that reality, but hopefully we will do more work to have those hard conversations, those in-person conversations, in a civil way, in a way that has constructive dialogue, rather than kind of blasting each other through social media channels.
I could not agree with you more. If you've had an opportunity to watch Hamilton, which is now available on Disney Plus, and no, I don't get any kind of kickback for saying that. There's an interesting scene towards the end that says they something to the effect of they knock each other in the press and they don't print retractions. So they're basically saying bad things about one another in the press. Well, they had to actually submit something to the press, wait for that paper to go to print. There was time in between to be able to interact, even though those papers were daily. We're now subject to this kind of vitriol, unfortunately, on a minute by minute basis, depending on who's out there. And you're right, we all have to work with our families to say, step back. A person who actually really wants to talk to us isn't just going to bash us in the press. They're going to send us an email. And we get lots of emails and phone calls with people who are angry or distressed that actually want to talk with us. And that's always the best way to go about it. If you disagree with us, great. Communicate. Office, specifically because of our mental health crisis and the own mental health challenges in my family, my own family's mental health challenge. And I finally ran my biggest bill this past session. And I've been working on it for years and years and years. And the idea of the bill is that in order to achieve true parity between behavioral health care and mental health care, you would have not only equal benefits, equal access under the law, but those benefits would look equivalent. So if your insurance gives you an annual physical, to me, parity means your insurance also gives you an annual mental health wellness exam. And for all these years that I've been in the legislature, I keep looking at the suicide rates and they're going up. I keep looking at the depression rates and they're going up. I keep looking at the anxiety rates and they're going up. And then we had a global pandemic. The president of Mental Health America recently said that we are about to begin an epidemic of despair, the biggest mental health epidemic of our lifetime. But we don't have to go there. Why? Because an annual mental health wellness exam will give you that opportunity to indicate to a qualified mental health care professional what is going on inside of you so that you can get the help that you need. And it might be as little as, hey, here are some coping mechanisms, or I suggest that you journal. And it may be as much as, let me recommend a psychologist to you who could work with you on a longer term, or maybe I can work with you on a longer term. Not me, I'm pretending to be a social worker here. So I put everything that I had into this bill. And when we go through an orientation at the beginning of becoming legislators, one of the things we're told is we have to carry our bills, not marry our bills. And I think that's a bunch of bad words. And I marry every single one of my bills. But this one was my first love, my first spouse, my first everything, and I put everything I had into it. And I thought I had done all of my homework, and I hadn't. And there was one critical component that did not like my bill, one critical individual that did not like my bill. And I hadn't done the work to get that individual on board. And without that individual on board, that bill doesn't have a chance of becoming law. So, lest you think I've left it alone, I've been doing work ever since we got out of session, ever since my bill had its untimely demise. Sad moments, sad moments. Poor Senator Moreno. I was texting him, please save my bill, please save my bill. Everybody was getting those texts from me. I sat there on my porch sobbing. My daughter telling me it was gonna be okay, it was gonna be okay. But I know the mental health epidemic we're facing. And I just want the pieces in place that we deserve so that we can be a healthy society. Because it's too much already. It's too much depression. It's too much suicide. It's too much loss. Every time I talk to kids, I try to remind them that there is hope, that the other side of this pandemic, at the other side of these troubles, we know, if you look at history, we know we're gonna come out on top. But we just gotta get there. We just gotta hang on. But you know what? We need more, we deserve more, and in 2008, when federal parity was passed, we were promised more. So losing that battle was a hard hit, but I'm not done yet. And I won't be done until we pass that and make it law. So I wish the story I just told you was the answer to my next question, which will be our final question today. But Representative Benavides, what are you most proud of that you have accomplished so far? And what do you think is on the table for you next?
Well, this year, there were 2 bills that I was able to pass that I am most proud of. And these are ones that took a long time. And I put a lot of work into it, but so many people did. And the first one was the repeal of the death penalty. It's one that I know where people are divided on that, but I really felt very strongly that there have been well over 200 people that have been exonerated from death row. And if we're making mistakes, sentencing people to death, then we shouldn't have it on the books. We shouldn't make those kind of mistakes that are final and there's no way back from them. So getting that passed this year was huge. And then the second one was repeal of Columbus Day as a holiday. That was one I have been on every year that I've been there, and I've testified before I went to the legislature, because I just think it's a mistake for us to have a state-sanctioned holiday that reveres a person who decimated nearly an entire people. And we had tried every way we could. This year it was twofold. This year we were able to repeal Columbus Day, but we were also able to establish the only state-paid holiday in the country for a woman who did a lot of work with immigrant families and for children. And that is Frances Cabrini Day. That'll be celebrated October 5th of this year for the first time. Those 2 were probably the biggest accomplishments. And I think I've forgotten the second part of that question.
I was so transfixed by your achievements that I have also, what do you have coming next? I was gonna say, I've also forgotten what's coming next. What do you have, what are you looking forward to as we come back to the legislature?
Well, I think there were a lot of bills that we didn't get to because of COVID, and several of them that I still have on the table. One is, Dominic was on this one with me as well, that will be bringing back a bill to address the air toxins release from Suncor and some other facilities across the state. Because as we learn more, those toxins are really impacting the health of our residents. So I'll just leave it at that because I've got to put them out.
Sounds good. Okay, Senator Moreno, what are you most proud of in your experience so far, and what do you have coming next?
Yeah, I would say the piece of legislation that I'm still honestly the most proud of was the first bill I introduced, Breakfast After the Bell, that extended a universal breakfast to all of our lower income schools in Colorado. 80,000 more kids have breakfast before they start the school day because of that law. And I will say, what you said earlier, Dafna, about like not marrying your bill, I actually said in the committee hearing for that bill, I know we're told not to marry our bills, but I have to be honest, I eloped to Vegas with this one because it was such, I think, an impactful piece of legislation to make sure that kids have their basic necessities met, that they are that they have proper nutrition, that they are eating so that they can do their best in school. Since then, I've been able to accomplish, a lot, and have been very proud of some of the bills I passed, some that I've worked with both Representative Benavidez and Representative Michaelson Jenet on, but, particularly one stands out around providing transportation services to foster kids so that they can stay in their school of origin. That was a great piece of legislation. And this more recently, our home health care workers are some of the lowest paid people in our state, and they do extremely critical work. They take care of our loved ones when they are sick or in their final moments, and they deserve to be paid accordingly. They deserve to make a living wage. And so we were able to increase the wages for home healthcare workers last year, and I will be building on that work in the future. So certainly more to come. Anything that we can do to support greater social and economic justice, those are the issues I'll be working on.
And for me, I knew, Senator Moreno, that you were going to say that, Bill. I just knew it. For me, my greatest accomplishment, similarly to Senator Moreno's, but for the lunchtime hour, was making sure that all of our students, all the way, they already had it from kindergarten, but all the way from kindergarten to 12th grade, if you qualify for reduced price lunch, you get that for free in Colorado. I call it my quintessential Jewish mother bill because the stereotype of the Jewish mother, eat, eat, eat. It's very true. It's very real. That's a very real stereotype. And for me, there was this great sadness in knowing, and we heard from a number of children who said they hid in the bathroom during lunchtime because they didn't want people to know that they didn't have enough money for lunch when their lunch was even only 40 cents. And so we're really grateful to see that our children across Colorado, whether you qualify for a reduced price lunch or free lunch, are getting that free, healthy, and nutritious lunch that are provided by our schools. And we're always continuing to work on improving the food that is served. And I have got to say that our lunch community, our lunch ladies, our lunch men, they are the heroes of the pandemic because they made sure that all of our children throughout the state were still able to get food even after schools closed. And that food extended beyond just the students to their families. So I can't thank the lunch serving community enough. And finally, what will I do next year? Well, you already know the answer to that. I'm going to pass that parity bill, and we're going to get the mental health care that we need, and I'm going to be able to talk about it without crying. I hope that you've enjoyed getting to know us a little bit, and if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below, and Representative Benavidez, Senator Moreno, or I will get back to you. Thanks for spending some of your Sunday afternoon with us, and take care, House District 30, House District 32, and Senate District 25. Senate District 21. It's my Senate District. You would think I would know the number. And Senate District 21. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.